So I've just hit record.
All right.
Yeah. So this one was quite spontaneous. Literally an hour ago, I asked you to record for me, and you said yeah. I think
Yeah.
I commented on one of your images on Instagram, and
Yeah, you did indeed. Yeah.
you replied, and I was like, "Yeah, do you want to jump on?" You're like, "Yeah." So
Bit more enthusiastic, but yeah.
I'm never enthusiastic. You should know this about me. So why don't you quickly introduce yourself and tell the viewers who you are, where you're from, and what drew you to photography?
Sure. Yeah. Well, hi everybody. My name's Sikandar Rana. I'm currently working within IT for a consultancy, and what drew me into photography initially was, I'd say, probably GCSE art. Uh, Big shout out to Miss McKenna all those years ago, really, for putting me onto the whole photography thing. I remember once I tried to incorporate photos into one of um, the projects that I had for GCSE art, and as soon as I held my teacher's DSLR, I thought, "Wow, I need more of this in my life."
Yeah,
And
I don't know what
so,
it is about a DSLR, but like going from like compact cameras or like phone cameras to a DSLR, it's like you have so much power in your hands and so much responsibility, and
I
you have to
think
like
like it's
learn how to use it.
I think it's like the heft, the sort of heft and the tactility that you
Yeah.
use when you like manipulate settings and such, which doesn't really come across when you just tap them on a screen.
Mm, mm. So I was going to ask you about your journey with photography. The first question I had down was what was it like using your first camera compared to how you compose an image today?
I think the uh, the first proper camera that I had was, I think it was a Nikon D3 200 while I was during my first year of university when I was in halls.
Hmm.
And I thought up until that point, from GCSE onwards, I pretty much just used my family's compact camera and like other things that they had lying around the house in order to learn about the things like the exposure triangle and like the like basic composition stuff. I'd say the feeling of the holding the first proper camera that I had in first year, it rekindled the sort of the feelings that I felt holding my teacher's DSLR in GCSE days. So I thought that after thinking that such great feelings were coming back to me after so long, I kind of solidify that this is something that I need to do long term.
Yeah, and the image that sort of made this podcast a thing was your latest post. I believe it's the image that you shot outside your like through your window at the moon, and they had like these power cables running across the frame. And
Oh, I see this one. Yes, the the image that was taken outside of like through my front door, through the sort of metal crisscross pattern that the window had.
yeah, yeah. Why don't you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about this image and how you decided to compose it and what you were sort of thinking as you were taking it?
I just saw what I think I just saw the sort of gradient of the sunset outside,
Mm,
and like the transition from the bluer hues outside to the more orangey hues of the sunset, and thought, how can I best capture this? Because I up until that point there was I just noticed that there was a distinct lack of sort of color gradient in the work that I was doing in
mm.
the photos that I was taking. Sorry, and
Oh, not at
so
all.
I thought, how can I best incorporate this gradient into a picture? And
Okay.
so I sort of used the power cables as sort of leading lines
Mm,
that sort of drew the person's eye to the moon.
mm, mm.
And yeah, I get that this sort of makes it sound like it's a purely technical thing, but it wasn't. I just liked the pretty gradient outside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you sort of use the sort of diamond pattern of your window at the front door to make frames within the frames, and it
yeah, to
really
sort of
like
add
sort
a
of
bit of visual interest. Yeah.
yeah. And the reason why this image I like so much is because during university I would look at like certain themes that sort of were reoccurring around me, and I had a little thing for chimneys and like
Hmm.
the roofs of the houses in Portsmouth.
Right. Hmm.
And a lot of the
Oh, you live in
time,
Portsmouth.
well, I was for university. I'm now in London.
Oh, I see. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's why I thought this image was so good. Like it's something that sort of spoke to me as like that's what I would photograph, and it's really well composed. Like the edges of the
Mhm, yeah.
frame are like
The
perfectly
was it
composed.
was it to do with the sort of slanting diagonal lines of the roofs? Maybe. I think that's a sort of key thing that like a lot of photographers that I follow are trying to incorporate into their work. Sort of diagonal lines cutting
Yeah,
through the frame.
yeah. It just adds. There are like different frames within the frame. Like if you look at the bottom corner, the the where the roof is set, I that's like one image that I like, and then the image in the middle with the moon and the leading lines is another image, and then the top right is like another image. It's like so many different layers in one.
Mhm.
I just really enjoy it.
Well,
Um,
thank you. Thanks. That's so great to hear.
are you doing any prints at the moment, or are you just sort of
Any
working for Instagram?
prints? Not prints per se. I do have a book of photos that I've printed that sort of follow a particular theme. I have it here.
Oh, you do?
Uh, yeah, it's called From Outside to In. And I what I did was I uh, ordered a bunch of the images that I've taken so far over the past, I don't know, year or so,
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of put them into, I think, one, two, three or four different categories.
Mm,
The first category was uh, images that were taken just in central London, just in my daily wanderings, just to and from work and on the weekends.
mm,
Hmm. And then the second was when I decided to hone in on Chinatown specifically, because Chinatown is a great place for sort of moment based photography. So you have, by and large, you have moment based photography and light based photography, in
mm,
my
mm,
opinion. I obviously it's not a catch all, but um, most photos can be put into two main categories:
mm.
moment and light. So if you want moment based photography, there's so much things happening around you in Chinatown. And so I thought that that'd be a great place for me to hone the sort of moment based
Do
style of
you follow
photography that
any
I have.
sort of like street photographers who shoot around London, or
So many,
what's your
so many.
who are your favorites?
uh, huge one is I'd say Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker's great.
Yeah.
He is he makes YouTube films as well about the more sort of philosophical side of photography. And so
Okay.
I feel that like no one's really done that before, and that's a space that he's carved out for himself. And
Mm.
like the fact that that really resonates with me is a bonus because I'm I'm past the gear phase.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We all have our gear
I
phase.
think. Yeah.
Um, so what's the name of the person?
Sean Tucker,
Sean Tucker.
Sean for
Mm,
Sean, Tucker, Tucker.
I'll have to definitely check him out because I it sounds interesting to me. Um, let me just go on to the second image that I wanted to have a look at. And
Yeah,
this
sure.
is the image of the rose bush, I believe. Again, it has in the background a power cable, but the center of the image is like this rose in shadow with like just a bit of red
Ah,
popping through.
yes, this one with with the sort of so the way this picture looks is for the audio listeners here is yes, a rose in shadow, but then with a cluster of leaves on the top left hand corner, with a clothing line out of focus cutting in a diagonal through the frame, as well as a little red pinkish shadow on the, well, not shadow but tint on the top right hand corner.
Yes, yes. And I didn't know it was a power line, but that makes sense. Not power line, a washing
Sorry, it
line.
was a washing up line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
And
very fortunate to have a garden
yeah,
in
yeah.
the place that I'm living at now. So I think a good chunk of these pictures are taken in the garden.
I something about the out of focus parts of the image, like in the foreground on the in the top left hand side of the image, your leaves are like just being touched by light. You're getting color
Mm-hmm.
from them, but they're just out of focus enough to be pleasing to my eye. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, it just
Yeah, I think
adds these.
I think the way this works is that there's well, not very clear, but if you sort of look at the image holistically, there's a pretty distinct foreground, midground, and background.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, so the foreground being the leaves, the midground being the rose itself that's coated in shadow with just a small patch of red, and the background being the sky.
what lens are you using for your images at the moment?
Uh, for this image in particular, I think I used my trusty Fujifilm X-T3 and the I have to get it off the back. Sorry, the 35mm f2.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so it's a pretty like small, light, compact package. These two, and
Mm,
so pretty much have all I need to take all the pictures that I need with fast, reliable autofocus and all the external manual controls that I'd ever need to manipulate settings in order to get the pictures that I get.
yeah, yeah. And I was gonna sort of talk about the way you compose images. Like personally, I've always had trouble with shooting landscape. It's like that's like a
Mhm.
personal thing of mine. Like I tend to shoot portrait a lot,
In
and
terms of orientation.
yeah, yeah,
Right, right. So portrait orientation.
yes. Um, what draws you to shooting in a landscape for your most of your images?
I
Like
think
orientation.
I'm I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit of a default for me because I
Mm-hmm.
just see so many pictures just taken in landscape orientation. I If anything, I have the opposite problem to you in that I'm struggling to find enough like enough like vertical interest in pictures in order to take them in portrait orientation.
Mm, I I always have a lot of dead space in my landscape images, or not landscape,
Hmm.
but in landscape orientation. And looking at
I
your
mean,
work,
like,
it's like I feel more inspired to shoot that in that way. Um,
yeah,
uh,
like I'd say negative space isn't inherently a bad thing.
it needs to be
Yeah, it
balanced,
could.
obviously, and I just have
Yeah.
always seemed to have it off. I don't know. What's your sort of process when you're taking images? What makes you get out your camera?
Uh, what makes me uh, when, in all honesty, when I'm bored and want something to do. Yeah, I
Fair
mean,
enough.
I want like I pretty much enjoy the entire process of taking pictures, both on digital and on film. To be honest, uh, the way that people talk about how film slows you down is very much true, but at the same time, it also requires quite a bit of um, discipline in order to do that digitally. So right now, I'm trying to slow down digitally.
Mm,
So
mm.
I'm trying to hone that and have that be like a main focus of my process.
Uh, I would say your images are very still very quiet and very
Yeah,
like
they don't sort of encompass much motion.
yeah, but that's what I like about them. Like they're very almost like you're meditating on an image. Like you're talking about being slow with film photography and translating that to digital. Uh, why don't you take us through like a process of taking an image? Let's go to another image of a rose. Is the black and white image
The
with
black and white image of the
the yeah
rose.
with two
The singular rose.
yeah, and there's like two windows in the background.
Yes, this one. So I Hmm. So the way I composed this image was I knew I wanted a sort of central composition for the singular rose. Well, the looks like two roses, but yeah, the sort of the singular sort of focal point of the
Mm,
image to be central. And then I wanted to sort of look for things like to rotate my sort of viewpoint around the singular rose in order to add some visual interest to the edges of the frame, but not make them too overbearing.
mm, mm,
hmm And then I actually shot this image in color uh, initially, and then
mhm,
changed it to black and white later because I found the colors of I think it was the brick of the background, the brick walls of the background near one of the left side windows,
mm, mhm.
too a bit too distracting, and so I think that's a sort of well, not really cop out, but cop out that a lot of photographers use if they find color too distracting. Just make it black and white,
Yeah, there's nothing wrong
and
with that. It works really, really
by and
well.
large, it works. Yeah, it worked for this one image. Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
good.
and there's again a theme with your work is like these really nice out of focus parts of the image, like the two windows are like perfectly balanced in the background, and
hmm
the tones in this are beautiful, and you've got like these details just off sort of cutting off in the frame, and again it's like creating like a frame within a frame, like a sort of border of
Mm,
detail.
right.
How do you personally go about converting into black and white? Like how do you tone your images? How do you
Uh, so I don't really use Lightroom in
mm,
terms of the software that I use to post process. I use a bit of free open source software called Raw Therapy,
okay.
and that is like pretty well known for its ability to process Fujifilm files really well. And
Mm,
so whenever I take pictures on my X-T3
mm,
or whenever I'm outside with like my sort of smaller camera, the camera that sort of that I always have with me, no excuses, my X70. Yeah.
mm.
Uh, I I just thought that yeah, it seems like the best tool for the job. It can run on my potato of a laptop, and yeah, it works. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. In terms of the conversion to black and white, there's a dedicated setting within Raw Therapy for black and white conversions in order to tweak the 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 amount of black and whiteness as in the overall saturation of the image, and then the way red, green, and blue tones in the resulting black and white image are emphasized.
Mm,
So I tweaked those sliders a bit and look to see what looks pleasing.
mm. Um, since you've got your book that you've made, why don't you share that with us and show a little bit of the content inside the book?
All right, sure, yeah. So this is the book From Outside to In. It's a sort of raw linen type of cover material. There's, there's this picture, which is pretty nice, that I thought would be a pretty fitting introduction to the book. And
Mm,
then I think I'd say a bit of a mistake, but not really. Uh, but in all honesty, it was my first time making a book, so mistakes will be made. But I decided to start with Chinatown
mm,
uh, in terms of the place where these pictures were taken. There's this. This was taken at I think 16:9 aspect ratio.
mm.
aspect ratio. So I was sort of experimenting with the more like cinematic style of pictures that 16:9 allows images to have. There was this with Chinese New Year celebrations, I think. Yeah, looks like it. There's this black and white picture with a man on a crane trying to take down the lanterns that were present in Chinatown at the time. Uh, there's a fair few blank pages just put throughout just to help with pacing a bit and to help some of the pictures that I really wanted, that I was really proud of, to stand on their own 2 feet a bit
Absolutely,
more
yeah,
and
yeah.
not to be accompanied by another one on the other page.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this. I really like this. And then I think we move on to London as a whole. Oh yes, there's this black and white picture. I remember when I took this picture, I had the whole. I watched a video by Sean Tucker in as a matter of fact, called. He has a great film called Protect Your Highlights, and it talks about the importance of allowing the brightest part of the images to not be blown out. And so it sort of allows people to be okay with the like good huge chunks of the image being very dark, and that providing balance to the shot. So that was a little experiment. This I took on, I think it was very close to the day that Fred Herzog died.
Okay.
So Fred Herzog was a very sort of influential street photographer of his time, I think in the 80s. And so I feel that this was one of the pictures that mimicked his style the best.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that particular photographer, but I'll try and find an image to illustrate to the viewers at home.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. There's this picture here that I took on the way back home from an exhibition that I took, that I went to, of a fair few London street photographers. And I thought that it was one of the, it's just a moment in London that I couldn't really envision myself seeing anywhere else. Yeah. This was a very, an image that's very sort of sentimental, in that this was before I got my X70. I shot with a Ricoh GR2, and this was the last picture that the Ricoh GR2 took before it sadly left this world.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's a sentimental value to this black and white picture. And so I live in Newham, and the London Borough of Newham. And so what's coming up is a few pictures that I've taken from the so there are these. I think I was trying to, sorry, I was trying to experiment a bit with distortion correction here in order to make sure that the lines in the image were as straight as they could be. And also with the whole protect your highlights thing, I really don't like highlights blowing out, as you can tell. But I'd say cameras have come a long way. So there's and it's just part of the journey of not just me, but any sort of photographer in that, like the way that you'd shoot and the things that you place importance on would just start to change through time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This was more of a more moment-based photograph that I thought was pretty cool. I think on my way to work one day, uh, they were trying to steam clean the streets or something. So I thought, wow, I probably won't be able to see that again. So I quickly got my camera out and snapped a picture. There's a few photographs here to do with my house, and so like my home and my garden, and so I think that they encompass pretty much what we've been talking about so far with the images that you've spoken about. So I think we'll leave the book there for now.
Okay. Don't want to give too much away. You were saying that you don't mind talking about being partially sighted and how that affects.
Yes.
Yeah. So why don't you inform us about that?
Sure. Yeah. It's so it's something that I've been born with and will probably have to deal with for quite a long time until medical science advances enough, or like it becomes, or such medical advances become cheap enough for me to afford. But I'd say that it hasn't really affected me so much. In people say it's really poetic that, oh, Sikandar, you can't see very well, but you do photography. But
how does that affect your photography at all, if at all?
I'd say that it definitely makes me a bit more detail oriented, and so I want to. I'm a bit of a stickler to make sure that things are in sharp focus, etc., etc. But and like making sure that images are as technically correct as I can make them as possible. I would say that I'm trying to sort of embrace when the technical aspects of an image aren't 100% min-maxed all the time, and sort of embrace photography as more of an artistic endeavor. So I've been trying to let go of that more detail-oriented side and embrace the happier accidents.
So you were saying like photography, you do that when you're bored, or it's like something to do. What does photography mean to you? Because you've definitely invested a lot of your energy into it, and you've produced a book, and you've got physical prints from what you're making. What does it mean to you as an individual?
I feel that it's a way to feel that it's like any sort of artistic endeavor that people do. They do it to feel that they have something to say, and so this is the medium that they choose in order to say it. And so I want to not just take photos to sort of like flex my creative muscles. I want to eventually, as a sort of end game kind of goal to my photography, to take pictures that rends people's hearts and has an impact on things like on issues that I hold dear to my heart. And so I feel that and if I'm able to do that while exploring the creative process and having creative fulfillment in that sense, then all the better.
Well, I've got one last image that I wanted to have a look at with you, if
Sure.
you don't mind, and that would be the last image you sent, which was it was taken at sunset with the reflection.
Yes,
again through your window.
Through my window, yes, yes. And the curtain blocking a good third of the frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This image to me is almost like a perfect image that I wish I could take. Like I've got an image quite similar to this,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's fully realized the same way yours is. Uh, Again, you've
Um,
got these frames within frames, and the light is so it's like sort of just sort of touching everything in the frame, from the curtains to the mesh, and all the textures and the layers are just like perfectly placed everywhere. And I struggle with color photography actually. I
mhm.
never know what to do with my colors, and I shoot a lot in black and white, just because that's how uh, I like to look at, like, the light based photography, like, as you were saying.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And again, your out of focus areas are just perfect. Like, they're not too out of focus where you're putting emphasis on the shape, but it's like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. But this is one of my favorite images of yours. Uh,
Oh, that's. Thank you so much,
what
Robbie. That
what
was
what was
like
you what were you thinking when you were taking it?
so. What I was thinking was, initially, I wanted to sort of balance positive and negative space in this image, and
Mm,
so with positive space being the light that's hitting the window and how it's able to be framed by the diamond pattern in the LED inserts in the windows.
yeah, and your window
I
compared
want
to the window outside you were looking at,
mhm,
across the
yeah,
road from your house.
yeah. So I wanted to balance the positive space that was offered by this picture here in that space with the negative space that would be offered by the diagonal cutting through uh, the frame that was occupied by my curtain.
Mm.
Yeah, so I'd say if I were to improve this image, then I'd probably, uh, I think on the very bottom, you can see my bin. So I think that's a bit of a distraction. So I'd
I
probably
don't
crop
think it's
that
a
out.
distraction at all, to be honest.
Mm,
In the middle of the road, there's a like a black van, and just
hmm
below that in the frame is your bin,
Yes,
and
yes.
those two elements serve, because they're quite dark in the frame. They serve as like negative space for your top right uh, subject, which is the um the
The
houses across
houses
the road. Yeah,
being hit by the sunlight.
yeah, and reflecting
Nice.
directly into the lens as well. Uh,
Okay, right.
I think it's
See that
perfectly balanced, like
there's
the it perfectly weighted. That's what I wanted to say.
okay. I didn't I didn't really see the picture that I took like that in that way. I've always thought that the looking at this initially, the bin was nothing more than a distraction. But wow, thank you for sort of putting my image in that light.
You're welcome. How do you decide when to end the frame? Like, I like the choice of the window frame being in the right hand corner, again creating a frame within the frame, which is sort of like a theme in your work.
Yeah, I think that that's a bit of a sticking point from the whole rule of thirds thing that people talk about.
Mm,
Yeah, I think that's I'm still very much in the phase of trying to look for that compositional elements that occupy the corner thirds of the frame. And
mm,
so I'd say that I'm still in the phase of following that rule before knowing when best to break it.
mm. Yeah, I guess that like personally, when I'm taking images like this, I am completely and utterly lost. Like, my comfortable uh my comfort zone is people, and sort of looking for compositions within sort of rooms rather than looking outwards. And I did actually do a project shooting outside of my windows and doors,
Mm-hmm.
and I did a couple images that are, I'd say, similar to your style, but I again, not my thing. And I, like, conceptually, I like the idea of having this rhythm with images, having a vantage point, and having this narrative of looking and being meditative with your images, but the results, I fell really short, and I might show some images in the video, but
Sure, yeah.
maybe not.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I don't think they're very good.
I think the whole aspect of you trying to not uh, you sort of realizing that the project of shooting through your windows and doors wasn't for you is like a really important way to grow as a photographer, and to realizing that things in general aren't for you is almost as important as finding this mythical one thing that will resonate with you forever for the rest of your life. Because the way that we develop and grow as individuals mean that the things that we like and dislike won't stay the same
Mm.
throughout our lives. So I think that knowing that it didn't work for you is okay, and realizing that maybe it may work for you after some thought about it or some further development is even better.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm gonna revisit, and taking your images as inspiration. You might see me copying your work a lot in the next few months.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah, I'm saying it to your face. I'm stealing your work.
Oh man, that's an honor. Wow.
Yeah, don't mention it. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sort of wrap up?
I just want to say that thanks for the opportunity again, Robbie. This was like really, it was unlike anything I've done before, and like I hope I was able to bring some kind of insight into my process, and hopefully make other people's photographic lives just that little bit easier.
I thank you very much for like coming on, because it was so last minute, and it was sort of like I saw the images, I wanted to talk about them, and I have the means to. I'm still working on, being producing a podcast, so hopefully this does come out quite well. I
I hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah, if it's anything like the last two.
yeah. Oh, that's a compliment. I'll take it. My 5 viewers will be very thankful to hear your insight. Uh, so yeah, I think we'll wrap up there. How was
Awesome.
recording that? Was that okay?
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop recording, and I'll probably message you on Instagram or something. All right.
All right, that's fine.
All right.
Bobby,
Thank you
take
so
care.
much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.